Miami tips off for their second game of Las Vegas Summer League later today, so we'll open up the mailbag in the meantime and answer questions about Damian Lillard, potential free agent additions still on the market, Miami's young core, and much more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, Dave Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Really fun show for you guys today. We're opening up the mailbag. It's been a minute since we've done this, but we've got questions about the Heat and how they can mend things with Tyler Herro if it gets to that point. Still available free agents that should be on Miami's radar and the most important role players that the Heat need to try to hang on to in a Dame trade. But let's just jump right in with this question from Luke, who writes in, if a Damian Lillard trade falls through, how can the Heat recover? Good starting place for this one, Dave, because it's pretty broad. You and I don't think that a Lillard trade is going to fall through, so I guess important to preface with that. But right. What do you think? How could they recover in this situation?
I think recovery is a lot easier than a lot of people might make it. As much as you'd want to hope as a fan that everything is always hunky-dory behind the scenes and it's one big brotherhood and everything else like that, these players know all too well how much of a business it is and that players can be traded at any point in time. You've got Jaime Jaquez, who's been in the league for about 2 weeks now, and he's already talking about, it is what it is. I see my name out there in trade talks. There's nothing I can do about it. I want to stay here in Miami, but if I get traded, I'll focus on my job. And when it comes to Tyler Herro, a player who's been drafted by Miami, who's been here for the last 4 years, who has been part of 2 finals runs and a run to the Eastern Conference Finals, he, I'm sure, has a lot more invested in his time in South Florida, but he's already under contract. He's going to get paid. He's going to be able to flourish wherever he goes, because he's probably going to have a different role as the primary or at least secondary scorer, something that he did not have here in Miami. And given that, I think it's a lot easier to quote unquote mend fences. If he does stay, he'll just accept it, continue his role, and find a way to continue to do his work and everything else like that, because you're always on display. You're always auditioning for 29 other teams other than the one you're on. So if he stays in Miami, he knows full well he could be traded in a month, in a year, in 2 years. Whatever he's under contract doesn't mean anything. As we're seeing with Dame Lillard, on the flip side of that, as much as as Heat fans might want Lillard to be traded out of Miami, the teams can make these trades as well. So they all understand that. They're all aware of that. It hurts. There's no doubt about it. But I don't doubt that Tyler is going to be able to focus with a very business-like approach on improving himself this season and being the best that he can be for Miami.
We've got questions specifically about the personality part of this, and the sort of inter-locker room, inter-front office, inter-team relations part of this. Sure. When I read this question, how the Heat could recover if they don't land Dame, I'm going to take this in a different direction and just mean, what else do you do in the offseason? If the Damian Lillard trade falls through, the Heat have already lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, in part because they thought they were going to go all in for Damian Lillard, and they do think that they're going to get Damian Lillard. And I'll say it again, I think the Heat ultimately end up with Damian Lillard, and this entire question is probably moot. But if something happens and Lillard gets traded to Philadelphia or Toronto, or something crazy happens, and Lillard isn't in Miami next year, there is going to be a big recovery, because I don't know what the Heat can do. Free agency is basically dried up. There's a few names still on the market that are kind of interesting that we'll get to in a little bit. But do you shift to a James Harden type thing? I don't know. It kind of feels like Harden might just be back with the 76ers. There's a better chance that Harden's playing for Philly next year than Dame is playing for Portland next year. I don't know what plan B would be, right? It's all right. I guess we're starting Tyler Herro at point guard. We start Josh Richardson, bring Caleb Martin off the bench, and kind of roll forward. Maybe we could find another power forward in free agency. Maybe it's still Kevin Love next year. We got Bam and Jimmy, obviously. That might be it. And then you're just sort of hoping for maybe something to happen by the trade deadline. Because when it comes to plan Bs beyond Damian Lillard, there's just not a whole lot out there. There's just not.
And it's not a bad place to be in either. I mean, you're looking at the team that I understand they lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, but
I
you
think it's an
made up
awful place
for
to
it.
be.
I don't see it that way. I think Josh is a competent starter for sure. I think he can give you 15, 20 minutes as a starter, maybe 25, 30. And I think that's fine. Again, as a good defender, as a guy who can knock down the ball, who can put the ball on the floor, etc. His skill set is there. I'm sure he'll be much better this year than he has been over the last few seasons when he was getting traded around from team to team and he couldn't find his footing, in that hierarchy of every team. And you've still got Kyle Lowry. If you start Tyler at the point, maybe that's not ideal. I mean, maybe you go with Kyle again as a starter and then have Tyler shift to his more natural 2 position. And Josh comes in there as a backup. You get somebody, maybe another point guard in free agency. I guess Goran Dragic and a reunion there is still possible. I'm sure there's some other names that we'll get to later on the show. Maybe it's not ideal. Obviously there's
It's
a
not
pretty
one of the
steep
top
drop
4
off from Dame
teams.
Lillard.
It's not one of the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. It's not going into the
They
season.
were last year, and they were still the best team in the Eastern Conference.
They were not the best team in the Eastern Conference. They won the Eastern Conference. They were in the play-in tournament during the regular season. They were not by any stretch the best team in the Eastern Conference in the regular season. And you don't go into the season being like, well, we could kind of be average all season, and then we'll just turn it on and have an historic run through the playoffs again. We could just do that again. No, I think, as much as it was, we're the underdog mentality and all this stuff, you would rather be the 1 seed than the 8th seed every single time. You would rather be the 1 seed. So I don't think it's ideal. And the reason we know it's not ideal is because the Heat are putting all their chips in on the Damian Lillard thing, right? And hopefully it just happens and we don't have to worry about this. That said, Andrew writes in, if the Blazers just don't trade Damian this season, do you think with a few more additions, the big 3 of Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam can win a championship this season? Andrew adds, Tyler looks shredded now. I don't know if that helps us, but could help him finishing through contact. Just brief thing on the Tyler Herro looks shredded. Let's just
watch early
until I get like an official weigh-in count at training camp. I don't care what you look like on Instagram. There was a few years back where Chris Bosh looked like Alonzo Mourning. Okay, on Instagram, we're like, oh my God, is he going to be a low post scorer? And he just came back looking like Chris Bosh, which was an amazing player, but he was just the same Chris Bosh. He didn't change at all. So Tyler Herro, I don't think he's doctoring his photos a la Ben Simmons, giving himself huge traps and pecs and triceps. But
you saw that from him last year. There were photos of him last year when he was boxing, and it's like, oh, you can see the development in the upper body. I remember, did we go to a camp a couple of years ago? Maybe you weren't with the pod at that point in time, but I remember going to a pod during that summer where he had put on some weight, and I remember Coach Tony Fiorentino talking about how much weight he put on and everything else like that. And it's like he came into camp and he still wasn't drawing fouls. He still wasn't doing anything different. And it's been 2 years since then. They put on muscle during the offseason.
They do. And he's been putting on muscle every offseason. He's eating nothing but Chick-fil-A every single day and just trying to put on weight. So I get it. Right? It's a great diet. He treats himself to a milkshake every once in a while too. But let's just hold off on that. That said, if the Blazers don't trade Dame, Andrew calls it a big 3 of Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam. I wouldn't go so far as to say a big 3, but I understand the sentiment. Can they win a championship this season? I would say it's a little too late for that few more additions part, right? I don't really know what else is available, like we just talked about. So you're really hoping again on a big leap from Tyler Herro and probably another big leap from Bam Adebayo and for Jimmy Butler to be more what he was in the playoffs more often in the regular season so that you don't have to scratch and claw your way to another chance at an NBA Finals where you could just make it a little bit easier for yourself. I would say not this season. I don't think that they could win it this season. I didn't think that they could make the NBA Finals last year, and I was wrong. So I have no idea. But I would say this. I think Tyler Herro can be that guy one day. I think this season is a lot to ask, but I think someday in the future, I think the reason why you're going after a guy like Damian Lillard is he's sort of what you're hoping Tyler Herro could be, and maybe what you even project Tyler Herro will be.
Right. But
he's that right now. And Tyler Herro is 23 years old. You need a guy who could space the floor, make plays with the ball in his hands, attack a bent defense, score at all 3 levels, do all those things, and you're not really worried about the defensive deficiencies because you've got Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Eric Spoelstra. So you're less worried about that than a normal team would be. Right. And Damian Lillard does all those things at an all-NBA level right now. And that's why you're doing that is to maximize Jimmy's championship window. But if you can't do it, I don't know. Maybe you shift towards more of a Bam Adebayo-centric championship window. And if that's the case, maybe you just let Tyler and Bam hammer out some sort of chemistry the way that we've seen, other big two-man games in the across the league have.
That seems a little unlikely to me anyway. I just
Yeah.
part of the conversation about why Dame would be so effective in Miami is because he could take that scoring load on. He's shown that he can over the course of his career. He's more than willing to, he's more than capable of doing so. And I think Jimmy and Bam are eager to embrace taking a back seat to let him be that top scorer. I don't think they'll be willing to make that take that seat back to Tyler. Like I think that's still a work in progress. So
that's something would have to happen like 3 or 4 years down the road, right? Like at the end of this contract extension, because he's 23. He's not even close to his prime. Like you just said, Damian Lillard walks in. He's an all-NBA player right away. Your number one scorer, day one, right? Turn the keys over to him. He's got it. He's driving now.
Yeah, I know it doesn't seem likely. I mean, which of those three things, Jimmy taking the regular season more strongly, Bam taking a leap, or Tyler taking a leap is what would you say in terms of likelihood you would rank those?
I don't know how much, like Bam's never going to be that guy that could be the number one scoring option on a 40-win team. It's just not going to happen, or a 45-win team or something like that. I don't think Jimmy's ever going to take the regular season that much seriously. So I actually think that Tyler taking that leap is the most likeliest thing. But like I said, I do think it's not realistic to expect him to take a leap to that point of, hey, I could be the number one scorer on offense. You and I agree on that. But I do think that one day he could be that. The problem is that you have Jimmy Butler at 32 years old, having to win right now. If Jimmy Butler wasn't on this roster, I think the Heat would be happy to just be like, all right, we've got Tyler at 23. We got Bam at 25. Let these guys just do what Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray did and just take years and years of, kind of honing that two-man game chemistry. And let's just ride this through. But because Jimmy is here right now at this stage of his career, you can't really afford to wait. And Bam right now is a top 20 guy in the NBA. So he's good to go at 25 years old. Tyler just has a lot more work to do. But, that's the balance that you're trying to strike in the NBA. When players are traded, what happens next? Do the Heat maybe owe Tyler Herro an apology at this point? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. But first, a word from our partners.
Are you finally taking that summer vacation you've been planning for a while, but you dreaded buying all the necessities before you take off? It's time to stop spending and your hard-earned money without getting anything back in return. And that's where Ibotta comes into play. It is a great app. It gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. You can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop, and you get your cash back. It's that easy. It really is. You just take a snapshot of your receipt, you get cash back. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year. That covers the cost of an entire shopping trip. Who wouldn't want an extra $100 in their pocket? Other apps gives you the points that you don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or via a gift card. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibotta app, or use the code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKED.
Welcome back to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. David is in Las Vegas, and he's going to be there in attendance tonight, Monday night, for the Heat's next Summer League game. We'll have our observations and takeaways after that, but we're continuing on here with our mailbag. This one comes from Dim, who writes in, when players are traded, is there any type of meeting with the team or coaching staff to set the record straight, or are things left as is and agents do all the talking? I feel like between not playing Game 5 of the finals and being in trade rumors, Tyler Herro hates us.
That's interesting.
It's an interesting question. In terms of whether or not, there's a meeting afterwards, nothing official, right? Nobody gets in a boardroom. There's not a Zoom call where you get on and you start, okay, this is why we traded you, and PowerPoint presentations. Like, that doesn't happen. There will sometimes be a phone call from a coach or a front office executive, something like that. They call up the player, in this instance, I guess a Tyler Herro, in a hypothetical trade, and say, hey, look, this is the deal. We're trading you here. This is what we're trading for. Here's the details of the trade. Thank you so much for, your service to the team. We loved having you here. Some platitudes, blah, blah, blah. Good luck going forward. Something like that. But there's not really like a whole lot hashing out. And I think there are things that are left unsaid, especially if something is a little bit tense or problematic at the end, if it's kind of like an ugly split. I don't know if this counts as an ugly split if it happens, if Tyler Herro gets traded for Damian Lillard. Tyler Herro has pretty much washed away all references to the Miami Heat on his social media. So he's obviously anticipating not being here next year. But I don't know. Usually this is, David, just from like an inside baseball perspective, like, this is why you get that interview after the player is traded, the really like kind of anticipated interview. What's he going to say about his former team? We just saw this with Jordan Poole, gave his first public interview with, as a member of the Washington Wizards. He had some things to say about his time with the Warriors and how his tenure there ended. So sometimes you got players that get their shots off in those kind of media settings. And then you get, obviously, like if it's a really problematic falling out and split, kind of messy divorce kind of thing, you'll get what Brian Curtis at The Ringer calls the "Now You Told Us" story, where after that player is traded out of that locker room, no longer part of the organization, all the leaks come out, and you get that reported story about inside the last 2 weeks of Russell Westbrook's tenure with the Lakers or whatever it's going to be, and then you get all the bleep gets thrown at the wall there. The rest of whatever you got that you couldn't say while Russell Westbrook or whatever player was around, and the smear campaign, in other words, is what kind of happens. I don't think that would happen here with Tyler Herro. I think the Heat have loved their time with Tyler Herro. It just so happens that he's not Jimmy Butler. He's not Bam Adebayo, and he's their best trade asset. And if they're trying to make a major upgrade, he's the way to do it. It sucks that he's always in trade conversations and in trade rumors. But I don't know. Do you think that he hates Miami? Do you think that there's like that level of ill will? Obviously, he has to be bothered by it, but like hate is a strong word.
No, I don't think there's any hate there. I mean, he's comfortable here. He's fathered his kids here. He's grown as an NBA player here. He's gotten paid here. So I think on many levels, he was happy here. And he's probably frustrated seeing his name in trade talks, not just this year, but last year with Kevin Durant and at various points throughout his career. So I don't think it catches him as any surprise. And I think as much pride and ego as each NBA player has, and it's necessary in order to be in the NBA, at the end of the day, he can take pride in saying, hey, I was traded for Dame freaking Lillard. Like, right. I mean, it's not like you were traded for a lesser player or anything else like that. You weren't traded for cash considerations or a second round draft pick or anything like that. They didn't uproot you and your family to go somewhere else for, something, a lesser player, or
you're not a salary dump. Yeah. It's a
right.
Great point. That's a great point. It's like, I got rumored to be in a Kevin Durant deal and I might get traded for Damian Lillard. Like, these are two guys on the top 75 list.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's that. I don't think there's no call between the front office to try and explain their position, especially not when you're acquiring Dame Lillard. I don't think there was any call. I'm not reporting this, but I wouldn't even think that there's any call between the team and his agent saying, look, we're looking to trade him. Because it's not, again, like it wasn't something that they needed to do. It was just something that came up in order to acquire a better player, a great all-time great player. And that being the case, it's not like, okay, we want to accommodate your trade request, or look, this summer is going to be a little tight. We don't have the kind of money. We've gotten the edict from on high that we need to clear cap space, et cetera. So we're probably going to look to engage in some trade talk, et cetera. So it's not like there's.
I want to stop. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think it's a really good point, and I want to stop there. There are situations where, okay, look, ownership said we need to cut costs. We're in the second tack, whatever it is. Let's work with the agent to try to find a landing spot for X player to salary dump into a place. So the agent starts calling teams. Hey, what he has other clients and free agency. He has an idea of what kind of cap space these other organizations are going to have. That does happen. But in this scenario, that's not what's happening here. It's, hey, we really want Damian Lillard. And unfortunately, it would just probably take Tyler Herro in order to acquire Damian Lillard. All right, let's move on to this question. From Tay, who writes in, with all these rumors around Dame, Miami, Portland, and everything that's being said in the media, would it be too much of a stretch to think that this deal has already been closed and the teams and everybody involved is just playing it up to make Portland look less like bad guys? David, what do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think just from the team perspective and from the player perspective, not that that matters really, because again, these players get traded all the time and they're seen as assets more often than not. They just want to get a head start. But I don't think anything's been finalized. I don't think Cronin is telling people in whatever front offices are involved, if it's a multi-team trade, hey, guys, can you please not leak anything or share anything? Because I want to look like I've done my job here. So that's not how it works. They're just dotting I's and crossing T's here. It's necessary to do the little steps here and there to get the things on the fringes of this deal that will make it happen for everybody. So it's not like they're just holding off on this to save Cronin's job or anything like that, because 29 other teams don't give a damn about Joe Cronin's job. They do solids for each other all the time. It's like, okay, we could do this, we could do that, but not this. Not like, from Miami's perspective, why would they want to do that if they could announce like today that they acquired Damian Lillard? Like they want to just get it done. They're not having Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez and whoever else might be traded out on the summer league team, knowing that they're going to get traded without telling them, et cetera.
And missing out on key free agents like Dario Saric just signing with Golden State, who's reportedly interested in Miami. Like, why would you wait if you can go ahead and make your other moves on the roster? You're right. This isn't happening. The deal's not done. I think everybody across the league anticipates that Lillard will be wearing a Miami Heat uniform next season, but there are still TBD portions of this. Who's the third team? Do you need a fourth team? Could there be as many as 5 teams involved? Where is Tyler Herro playing? Because it doesn't seem likely that he's going to be playing in Portland. And the Trailblazers, if they're going to take Tyler Herro, you might as well just reroute him now in a larger trade package that nets you all the first round picks or whatever it is that you're trying to get back. So there are still parts of this trade unresolved. That much is for sure. I just think most people assume that however the trade ends up shaping out, it's going to look like it's going to end up with Damian Lillard in Miami. It's just everything else other than that. Excuse me, I just hit the microphone. Everything else other than that is very much in the air. This part I will say in terms of the conspiracy, I love an NBA conspiracy theory. This would be the wrong way to play it if that's what you did anyway. If you're really going to play up this conspiracy theory, you needed to get that second team involved, or maybe that fake meeting with this other team X to make it look like there's more of a bidding war. Because right now, the people who are so upset by this, they are most upset because there is no second team. There's not a list of preferred destinations that the superstar usually puts together in the event of a trade request. Damian Lillard named one place, Miami. And people don't like the fact that this feels a little bit like an NCAA-style transfer portal. That's what people don't like about this. They don't like that he signed the long contract and is now trying to dictate where it is that he wants to go. And I get that, right? So the biggest problem, the biggest hole in all of this, the biggest problem in this plan was that Damian Lillard just never named a second destination. If he did like what Kevin Durant did and said, hey, send me to Phoenix or Miami, people are like, okay, yeah, we get it. Brooklyn, that's not going anywhere anytime soon. You deserve to get traded. If Damian Lillard just said, hey, trade me to Miami or Brooklyn, I think people would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense to us. But the fact they said, trade me to Miami, period, and his agent is out here saying it's Miami or nothing, period, that's the biggest problem that people have. So if we want to go full conspiracy theory, I think this is the way you do it. If you're Damian Lillard, you come out and you leak, you know what, actually, I am warming up to the idea of playing in Salt Lake City or something like that. Or you know what? We're taking a meeting with the New York Knicks to see what they could cobble together. And then people will be like, oh, wow, look, it's a bidding war now. But none of that stuff actually happens and you just get traded to Miami anyway. That's the way to do the conspiracy theory if you're going to do it right. All right, what's our realistic time frame for a Damian Lillard deal? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we will be back tomorrow with our takeaways from Monday night's Summer League game for the Miami Heat. Let's move on with our mailbag here. Marcos writes in, what's a realistic time frame for a Damian Lillard deal in your opinion? If it doesn't happen, do you see him staying in Portland or actually being traded elsewhere? David, what do you think?
So I'd say probably within the next week or so, like I said before on yesterday's podcast and reiterated today, I just think that there's just too much that's been built up at this point. And if anything, they're just trying to put in the finishing touches on this deal. There's probably a framework. We've heard it could be as much as a 5, 6, 7 team deal. Who knows? It's just about making sure everybody gets what they want and getting everybody on the same page. These things are very, very, very complicated. You can't it's not just as simple as, oh, this for that. especially in a deal this big, because there's a lot of different potential players involved here. And players, I mean, by franchise, there's a lot of different teams that want something. A second round pick, taking something off the board, taking a future pick, a player, maybe a lesser player, just to make a salary dump move. It depends on what every team involved, a potential team involved, wants out of this. So I think it's still just a matter of getting everything taken care of. Again, so much buzz around town is just, Dame's going to get traded sooner rather than later. I think that's still the case. I would expect something to get done within the next week or so, just because Joe Cronin's expected to talk today. Even he's talking to reporters probably within the next couple of hours here in Las Vegas to address everything. I'm sure he'll be asked what the holdup is. We'll probably get some clarification from him at that point in time, but he's not going to say too much. He can't offer too much about that.
Right.
To the second part of the question, as far as after the time frame is concerned, I do think that they're more likely to trade him somewhere else. Like, he may just be frustrated with the whole situation, say Miami wasn't open, they weren't willing to include X, they couldn't budge on that, they couldn't get this. And if that's the case, we're going to go ahead and move forward. Who cares? If Dame's unhappy, that's up to them. If we look like, we wind up with egg on our face because we make Dame unhappy, we'll take that chance as long as we get 5 future first-round picks and young players in exchange for a player of Dame's caliber. They're not going to keep him. Dame's not going to be happy. And I know a lot of people, even reporters on this show, have come on and said, Dame's going to report wherever he's on the roster. That's likely to happen. I don't think that he's likely to report to camp in Portland already saying, I can't do this. I don't want to continue to do this. His stock's not going to drop if he holds out for some time.
Right.
And again, you've got a couple of months before the start of the preseason to make something happen with Brooklyn or Oklahoma City or San Antonio or any of these other potential partners that might have a better trade package than Miami does.
I agree with you. I think that it's over in Portland. And let's not forget this, by the way, in all of the hoopla and the anger surrounding this whole situation, the Trailblazers want to trade Damian Lillard. This isn't a team being held captive trying to do something that they don't want to do, right? This is a team that has wanted to trade Damian Lillard, and that was reported, and everybody was like, they're a little split. They would like to keep Damian Lillard. Joe Cronin, we're going to try to build a contender around him. He said all these things, but guess what they did? They never even tried to build a contender around Damian Lillard. They kept the number 3 pick. They took Scoot Henderson. They, during the season, traded Josh Hart, a good player, not going to swing the championship in your favor, but a good veteran player who knows how to play basketball, who's of Damian Lillard's age, or around there. They traded him for a draft pick. That's a move that a rebuilding team makes. That's a move that
imagine if Miami had traded Caleb Martin in February for like a second-round pick or something like that.
Yeah, a protected first-round pick, the way that they traded Josh Hart for, and you're like, wait, what? Why are you doing this? And obviously,
are you tanking on this season? What's going on here? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Jimmy would have been happy with it, et cetera.
Right, and so this is a team that was making all the moves with the idea of trading Damian Lillard in mind. So let's not just sit here and pretend that they never wanted to trade Damian Lillard, even if that's what they're saying publicly. Their actions speak much louder than their words. Okay, so Damian Lillard doesn't want to be there, but more importantly, they don't really want him there. I understand that they don't want him specifically not there. They want to trade him and get the stuff back that they want. I understand that, but that's what they want. They would rather have the first-round picks and the good young players to surround Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson with instead of Damian Lillard. And we know that because that's exactly what they've been doing this entire time. Lightning round to finish this off. How's that sound?
Good.
All right. Terrence writes in, with Caleb Martin having the ability to opt out next offseason, do you think that the Heat will be able to pay him the money that he will command? That's the question. The player option that Caleb has after this year, $7.1 million in that final season of that 3-year contract. If he has a great year, he probably would opt out of that deal. And in terms of whether or not the Miami Heat are going to pay him, I think it just depends. What kind of season does he have? What kind of money do they have left after a Damian Lillard deal if it does happen? And more importantly, I think, David, who do you have left maybe that's there to backfill? Do you have to trade Jaime Jaquez Jr. in a Damian Lillard deal? Or do you still have him? And is he somebody that can backfill Caleb Martin on a rookie scale contract as opposed to having to pay Caleb $12 million a year or whatever it might be? So I think that's what it would come down to. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Everything you said was spot on the money. As far as like Caleb's own wishes, I'm sure he'd love to stay in Miami. You always have an affinity for a place that helped you and got you the opportunity and paid you in the first place. But if you can go out and get more money everybody's going to take it. And that's just the nature of this. Like, he has not gotten paid to the point where he can just say, you know what, I'm willing to take a friendly hometown discount or anything like that. That's not the case. He's going to get what's likely to be his first big contract. If he can get the same similar contract that Max Strus got, etc. We saw how that played out. Gabe, Max, nobody was knocking on their doors to bring them onto their rosters, but they both got paid over $10 million a year as free agents this year. And so that being the case, I'm sure Caleb will take that opportunity if it presents itself. The only thing that could change that, I think, is a potential injury, and you never hope for that to be the case.
One of the best value contracts in the NBA right now, Caleb Martin. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
2 years running.
Yep. Johnny writes in, which Heat player aside from Caleb would you want to stick around when the dust settles on a Damian Lillard trade? Aside from Caleb? Because that would be at the top of my list is Caleb Martin. Wow. I will go and say, I think Duncan Robinson, actually.
Ooh.
I think you're going to need, especially if you have to trade Tyler Herro. Like, Damian Lillard's not enough three-point shooting by himself. You're going to need another three-point shooter to come off the bench. I thought the way Duncan Robinson played in the playoffs was awesome. He was better than Max Strus, who was the one that just got paid. I know that Duncan Robinson's salary looms large on Miami's cap books. They probably would like to trade that at some point. But right now, I don't have a problem with it. By the way, it's only partially guaranteed in the final year of it, so the Heat can move off of it relatively easy after this season. I would like to have him coming off the bench. He kept his fouls low during the playoffs, only averaged like 1 foul per 36 minutes, which is about right where you want a perimeter player. Yeah, I think Duncan Robinson's my answer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I first heard this question, I thought to myself, probably thinking along more of the lines of the young players, but Duncan fits so many areas of need there, especially with the loss of Max Strus. You need to have at least one qualified super elite shooter, and Duncan fits that bill. For all the problems that Heat fans have had, that's just basically in context of his contract more than anything else. Like, that hasn't diminished what he can do as far as a shooter, and the way he spaces the floor. He's still a respected player around the league. So yes, Duncan, I think, is certainly the case. Having said that, I think my second player that I'd like most is probably Nikola Jovic. I just think the upside there is unmistakable, and he just does so much for his size, the way he can bring the ball down, make plays for others, and eventually even perhaps provide some more of that floor spacing as well.
Super Guy 454 writes in, what's one free agent you would like to see on the Miami Heat? I'm going to just go out and say Christian Wood. And I'm not really a Christian Wood guy, but he's kind of the best free agent available. He's got the highest upside. And if you do get Damian Lillard, I think having another floor spacer, another big guy who can rebound and kind of create some positional versatility, that could be really valuable. And just sort of as a basketball fan in general, just sort of interested what the Miami Heat could do for a guy like Christian Wood, who has been maligned in every situation he's been in, every team. It just hasn't worked out. Questions about his commitment, questions about his defense. Just curious, with a guy with his skill set, his base level talent, could the Miami Heat get the most out of him? I'm curious to see that. So I would go Christian Wood. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. Like everybody else, there are some decent players out there. Grant Williams is signed with Dallas, of course. Other decent players that could fit like an obvious role, might even be starters on this team, are restricted free agents. So they're not really options because Miami can't really offer much, and whatever teams it currently has their rights would probably match those offers. So that kind of takes them off the table. Aside from that, you've got some older players, even maybe a couple of younger players there, but no players that really seem to have as much potential. Like, if there was one thing about Caleb, and I remember when he was first added to the team, I remember you told me, oh, you seem to be high on this guy. I was like, oh yeah, he's got the athleticism. That there was no doubt. He's a swing player, a guy who can drive to the basket, can cut baseline, can finish. The shooting touch kind of off and on. That's still the case of who he is even today, but he's just improved in all those marginal aspects. I don't know that there's a player like that, 24, 25-ish, that's had an opportunity to showcase his talents in the league and just hasn't had a good opportunity. There's just not a lot of names. Wood is absolutely the best. Other than that, you've got older players that are still looking for another chance. Like I said, Goran Dragic.
Quick list.
Yeah.
Terrence Ross, TJ Warren, JaMychal Green, Terrence Davis, Danny Green, Darius Baisley, Goran Dragic, Kemba Walker. That's the list that I had when I got this question.
Baisley is a good thing because he does fit that. He does have that skill set. He's big enough. He could potentially even be a starter at the 4 for this team. That's just how it's worked out for Miami because he's long. He's got a big enough frame. Miami will get him to that next level. It was just kind of overcrowded in Oklahoma City with young players with potential. And he just didn't have that opportunity. So I think Miami would certainly help him take that next step. in terms of his development. So that's a potential name, but it's Christian Wood, Baisley, and other than that, I from that list, I don't know if there's anybody else that really even stands out.
The JaMychal Green thing is interesting in that it's always sort of like, oh, he's a floor spacing big man, and then you get him and you're like, he's not really that much of a floor spacer. He's very streaky as a shooter. Defensively, there's a lot
Miami
of work
hasn't
there.
Called. I'm surprised Miami hasn't called.
There are apparently a lot of players like Dario Saric and maybe even Christian Wood waiting for this Damian Lillard situation to play out. I would imagine maybe even somebody like TJ Warren is like that a little bit. I don't know. We know that the Heat are calling free agents saying, hey, please wait, please be patient. But Saric, Malik Beasley, who they were trying to do that with, he signed with Milwaukee. There's only so much patience that those guys have. How much patience does somebody like Christian Wood have is interesting. The Heat right now have 13 players under contract on the roster. That's not including the two-way guys. That could be less if a Damian Lillard, if it's like 2 players or 3 players get shipped out for Damian Lillard, you can even have even fewer than that. I would expect the Heat to carry 14 players, not the full 15. I'd expect them to carry 14 going into next season, considering how much they're already paying in overall payroll for this roster. So they're going to have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 other spots to fill out if and when a Damian Lillard trade gets done. And then just another reason why you would prefer something to get done on Dame sooner rather than later if you're the Miami Heat. But we'll see what happens. You know where to tune in when something does break for all the latest news, for all the latest updates on Damian Lillard. Tune into Locked On Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Every day is David, still in Las Vegas. We're going to be back tomorrow with his observations on the Heat's next Summer League game, Monday night against the Summer League Suns. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. David, stay cool out there in the desert.
I saw a tree catch fire. It was this hot out there. Like a palm tree on the side of the road just burst into flames. That's not something you see every day.
Well, you don't burst into flames. You just make sure you don't do
so.
that. All right.